My mother always said my college fund was a misunderstanding, but an old birthday letter made me question everything. I was 19 when my mother first told me the money didn't exist. The timing couldn't have been worse. I had just been accepted into a state university. It wasn't expensive compared to many schools, but it was still more than I could afford on my own. For as long as I could remember, my parents had talked about my college fund. Not constantly, just enough that I never questioned it. Whenever relatives asked where I planned to study, my mother would smile and say, "We'll help him, we've been preparing for years." So when tuition deadlines started approaching, I assumed we'd sit down and discuss the account. Instead, my mother looked confused. "What account?" At first, I thought she was joking, then I realized she wasn't. "The college fund," I said, "the one you've talked about my whole life." She stared at me. Then she laughed, not a nervous laugh, a dismissive one. "Oh, honey, there was never a college fund." I remember feeling physically cold. My father was sitting at the table, too. He didn't say a word. I looked at him. He looked away. My mother continued eating dinner like she hadn't just changed my entire future. She claimed I had misunderstood years of conversations. According to her, they had only hoped to save money. Nothing had ever been guaranteed. Nothing had ever been formally set aside. I argued. She denied everything. My father stayed silent. Within weeks, I took out loans. I got a part-time job, then another one. I spent the next 4 years balancing classes and work while accumulating debt. Meanwhile, my older sister Ashley never seemed to struggle financially. She was 6 years older than me. She owned a house. She drove a newer car. She had never talked about student loans. Whenever I asked how she managed it all, she'd shrug. Good budgeting. At the time, I believed her. I wanted to believe her. It was easier than considering other possibilities. Years passed. I graduated, started working, slowly paid down debt. The whole college fund situation became one of those painful family topics nobody discussed. Whenever I brought it up, my mother became defensive. She'd repeat the same line. It never existed. Eventually, I stopped asking. Then my grandmother died. Everything changed after that. My grandmother had lived in the same house for almost 50 years. After the funeral, the family gathered to clean out her belongings. Most of the work fell to my mother, Ashley, and me. The attic was packed with boxes, old photographs, greeting cards, tax records, letters. Hours into sorting, I found a cardboard box labeled family documents. Most of it was ordinary. Then I noticed an envelope with my name on it. The handwriting belonged to my grandmother. Inside was a birthday card from my 12th birthday. I almost threw it aside. Then a folded piece of paper slipped out. It wasn't part of the card. It was a letter, a short one. My grandmother had written, "Your mother told me she's finally moved your college money into the same investment account Ashley received hers from. I know you're too young to understand now, but I hope one day it helps you achieve your dreams." I read it 3 times. My heart started pounding. Ashley received hers from, not will receive, received, past tense. I looked at the date, 12 years old. The letter had been written 7 years before my mother claimed the fund never existed. At first, I thought maybe I was misunderstanding. Maybe there was another explanation, but something felt wrong, very wrong. I quietly put the letter in my pocket. I didn't mention it, not yet. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every conversation I'd ever had with my mother, every denial, every accusation that I had imagined things. The next morning I returned to my grandmother's house alone. Nobody questioned it. There was still plenty left to sort. I spent hours digging through boxes. Then I found another clue, an old Christmas card from my grandmother to my mother. Inside was a handwritten note. Most of it was ordinary family stuff. Then one sentence stopped me cold. "I still think giving Ashley both accounts at once was unfair to your son, but I know you were trying to help her." I felt sick. Both accounts, not one, plural. There was no ambiguity anymore. Something had existed, something significant, and somehow Ashley had benefited. I took photos before putting everything back. Over the next few weeks, I became obsessed. I searched old emails, old family documents, anything I could find. The strangest thing wasn't the letters, it was my father's behavior. Every time I casually mentioned college expenses from years ago, he became uncomfortable, not angry, guilty. One evening I asked him directly, "Did I ever have a college fund?" His face changed immediately. For several seconds he didn't answer, then he said something strange. "Why are you asking now?" No, not you're mistaken. Why are you asking now?" That answer told me more than anything else. I showed him the photograph from my grandmother's letter. He stared at it for a long time, then he put the phone down. "I don't think this conversation will help anybody." I knew then he knew exactly what happened, but he wasn't willing to say it, at least not yet. A month later I got my breakthrough. My aunt called me unexpectedly. Apparently she'd heard I was looking through family documents. She sounded nervous. Then she asked a question. "Did you find something?" I told her about the letters. There was a long silence. Finally she sighed. "I wondered when that would come up." My stomach dropped. What do you mean? She hesitated. Then she told me a story I'd never heard before. When Ashley was 21, she'd gotten into serious financial trouble, not because of school, because of her boyfriend. They'd tried starting a business together. It failed, badly. There were debts, collections, threats of lawsuits. My aunt said my mother panicked. She became terrified Ashley would ruin her future. According to my aunt, that's when my mother emptied multiple savings accounts. One of them was Ashley's college account. The other was mine. I could barely speak. My aunt continued. The understanding was that your mother would rebuild your fund before you got older. But she never did. I sat there in silence. Everything suddenly fit together. The denials, the defensiveness, the guilt, the weird tension whenever education came up. But one question remained. Why deny it entirely? Why not admit the money had existed but was gone? Then my aunt said something that answered everything. Because your mother convinced herself she made the right decision. That sentence stayed with me. A few weeks later, I confronted Ashley. I expected denial. Instead, she looked exhausted, like she'd been carrying something heavy for years. We sat at her kitchen table. I showed her the letters. She started crying almost immediately. Not dramatic crying, kind people do when they're tired of pretending. I didn't know it was yours, too, she said. I didn't believe her at first. Then she explained. When the money was given to her, my mother told her it was family savings, emergency money meant to help her survive a crisis. Ashley admitted she'd suspected there was more to the story, but she never asked questions. She was desperate, scared, in debt, and willing to accept help. Then she told me something else. Years later, she learned part of the truth, not all of it, just enough to feel guilty. She'd asked my mother whether my education savings had been affected. My mother became furious. The conversation ended with shouting. After that, Ashley never brought it up again, not because she didn't care, because she was afraid of the answer. For the first time, I saw her differently, not as the favored child, not as the villain. Just another person caught in my mother's decisions. But there was still one conversation left. The hardest one. I confronted my mother. I brought copies of the letters, photographs, everything. When I placed them on the table, she immediately recognized them. Her face went pale. For a moment, I thought she might finally tell the truth. Instead, she doubled down. She claimed the letters were misunderstood, taken out of context, misremembered. Then I showed her the second letter, the one mentioning both accounts. Her confidence disappeared. The room became completely silent. Finally, she whispered something I'd waited years to hear. There was money. Just 4 words, but they changed everything. I asked how much. She didn't answer. I asked why she lied. She didn't answer that either. Instead, she started talking about Ashley, how scared she had been, how much trouble Ashley was in, how a mother couldn't abandon her child. I listened. Then I asked a simple question. What about your other child? She had no response, not immediately. Then she said something I don't think I'll ever forget. I thought I could fix it before you found out. There it was, the real reason, not greed, not favoritism exactly, at least not in the way I'd imagined. She believed she could take the money temporarily, rebuild it later, make everything right before I ever noticed. But years passed, life happened, the money never returned, and eventually admitting the truth became harder than maintaining the lie, so she rewrote history. The fund never existed, the promises never happened. My memories were wrong, the letters proved otherwise. After that conversation, my father finally spoke. He admitted he'd argued against taking my money. He admitted he'd lost. Then he admitted something even worse. Afterward, he stayed quiet because he didn't know how to undo the damage. His silence lasted nearly a decade. I was angry, but strangely not in the explosive way I'd expected. The mystery had consumed me for so long that learning the truth felt almost anticlimactic. The real pain wasn't losing the money. It was realizing how many years my family spent protecting a lie. A few months later, Ashley did something I never expected. She showed me financial records, old documents, bank statements, everything. She wanted complete transparency. Together we pieced together what happened. The amount wasn't enormous, enough to pay for most of my education, enough to spare me years of debt, enough to matter. Ashley eventually offered to help repay part of what I'd lost. I refused. Money wasn't the point anymore. The point was honesty. The point was that everyone had known pieces of the truth except me. Today, my relationship with my mother is polite but distant. We talk, we visit, but something fundamental never recovered. Trust isn't destroyed by a single decision. It's destroyed by the years spent hiding it. Sometimes I think about how differently things could have gone if she'd simply told me the truth when I was 19. I would have been hurt, angry, disappointed, but eventually I might have understood. Instead, she chose a version of reality that required constant maintenance. A reality where I was mistaken, where my memories were unreliable, where promises had never been made. The strange thing is that the letters themselves weren't what hurt most. They were just paper. A few sentences written by a grandmother who had no idea she was documenting a secret. What hurt was realizing that the mystery I'd carried for years was never really about missing money. It was about discovering how easily someone can convince themselves that a lie becomes truth if they repeat it long enough. And if my grandmother hadn't kept those old birthday cards in a forgotten attic box, I probably would have spent the rest of my life wondering whether I had imagined the college fund after all.